Hey everybody, and welcome back to another severe storm film or weather forecast. In today's forecast, we're going to be talking about a very active weather pattern that is going to set up for the rest of the month across certain parts of the country, depending on where you are. So without further ado, let's get right into it. We'll take a look at our jet stream energy. Pretty big dumpy of cold air this afternoon across pretty much all of the United States, including the western United States and especially the central and eastern United States. Definitely noticing that big dumpy of cold air after that winter storm passed by through the Ohio Valley yesterday, which put down some decent accumulations for some areas, especially the further south you went. But as we take this into the daytime hours tomorrow, mainly tomorrow evening, according to this model here, you can see there are several areas of cold air advection that is going to be taking place across the country. All right, there's one right here. There's another one right here. All right, this one is the polar vortex. All right, this is not going to reach into the United States quite yet, but it could as we head in towards the end of the month. Notice how it just kind of sits there waiting to be dumped with cold air here. And notice how it begins to dump cold air in to the United States as we head in towards mid this week. All right, here we are around the 15th. You can see here's your polar jet as far south as Tennessee. You're probably going to have some pretty dangerously cold wind chills anywhere in this circle region. That includes the Great Lakes back anywhere in the portions of the Northeast. And then as we take this ultimately in towards late week, this is when that weather pattern will start to get super active across the country, with our subtropical jet starting to soar northward and our polar jet starting to try to connect with that subtropical jet. All right, we might need to watch out for some sort of nor'easter around this time frame, so that'll be something to keep an eye on as we head mainly into Thursday the 16th, but Friday the 17th, we might need to watch for that as well. Not saying there will be a nor'easter, could be completely offshore, but there's definitely going to be a big storm system, at least offshore, that the northeast coast will have to keep an eye on. Then as we take this in towards the 17th into the 18th, this is when things start to get active. All right, you can see here's your polar jet, all right, and you can see here's your subtropical jet. This subtropical jet is connecting almost with this polar jet. And you know what that means? That is going to spin up a storm system somewhere around here, producing a pretty big snow event anywhere in this area, maybe back down here. We're going to have to wait and see what happens here. Models have definitely been consistent in showing a pretty big winter storm across the Ohio Valley back into the deeper south as we headed in towards next weekend, and that'll be accompanied by some really cold air behind it, so that'll be something to keep an eye on here. But watch what happens as we head in towards late next weekend. The pattern gets even more active as time goes on. All right, here's another dumping of cold air across the United States. All right, this is where your storms are going to track along this boundary, and meanwhile you throw a little bit of subtropical jet energy into any storm system that flies up the East Coast. You're going to have a massive winter storm of some sort on the northern end of whatever storm develops. But there is confidence, at least like medium to high confidence, that there will be a storm system that rides up here. So we're going to need to keep an eye on that around that 19th time frame. And then as we take this in towards early next week and towards the 21st time frame, this pattern will continue to get more active. All right, you can see here is your lobes of the polar vortex trying to make it a pretty decent appearance into the United States. I'm just going to assume that that's how it's going to go. And here's your standardized polar jet here. You can see it's dipping down pretty far south, and that's significant, creating a storm track up the eastern seaboard. This is the exact storm track of the blizzard of 1978. So that'll be something to keep an eye on there. We've had this storm trap many times, but we haven't seen the subtropical jet punch this much energy, at least a signal of it, into the polar jet in this quite a bit of time. So I will say right around in here, I'd say we really need to keep an eye perhaps on a pretty massive winter storm or even a blizzard headed in towards that time frame. Not saying that's going to be a definite, but this pattern definitely supports it. So we need to be all eyes on deck here. As we take this beyond that time frame in towards mid next week, this is when the models start to spread. You can see here, here's your polar jet still continuing to dump cold air into the United States. All right, it starts to merge completely with the subtropical jet. And this is something that's a little bit more high confidence, all right? It might seem hard to believe, but since it's so far out, even though the models have a lot of spread, there is confidence there's going to be a very strong storm at some point here, all right? You can see that yellow there. That is a jet streak, and that just indicates you have a lot of energy waiting to be driven up the East Coast in the atmosphere. So this would support storms doing something like this, developing in the Gulf and then riding right along the Appalachian spine and then riding offshore. This is your standard nor'easter setup. Later in the setup here. This would allow for a nor'easter type setup for areas of New England as well as Maine, but as you get back here, this supports a blizzard pattern for areas of the Ohio Valley back into portions of the interior Northeast. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on as we head in towards that January 22nd time frame. And then as we head beyond this, no signs of this pattern letting up. This is just going to continue dumping cold air. The storm track's going to continue around the Ohio Valley with massive storm systems in this general vicinity. We will continue to keep it posted with the latest, of course, because there's probably going to be at least 2 or 3 big storm systems that ride along this boundary. And even on the model runs here, taking a look at precipitation type, the models are actually hinting at actual storm systems here. All right, so I fast forwarded all the way from today to the 18th, and you can see here, here's a sign of a storm system developing here. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty, like I said before, but like I said, the trend is that there's going to be an active storm track up the Appalachian spine. Well, not exactly like that. You saw on the jet stream scan, you can rewind on that video, but anyways, there is a sign of a storm system here. This would likely produce severe weather, and this would likely just be a severe weather maker for areas like the southeast regions. I do have a hint that there's going to be a snowstorm somewhere on the northern end of the storm, but it's uncertain where that'll be. So just watch if you live like in areas like Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, those areas. Just keep an eye on it. We'll continue to keep it posted. As we take this in towards Sunday the 19th, you can see here, severe weather is likely going to be a big problem across portions of the southeastern United States, at least in isolated fashion across portions of Georgia, as well as the Florida Panhandle, with the potential for maybe a gusty line of storms. We're going to need to keep an eye on that. I'm actually going to be in Orlando around this time frame, so I'll record anything and post it to my channel if something happens. And then as we take this in towards early next week, around that 20th time frame where the pattern changes yet again, you can see here the pattern supports a big storm system around this time frame too. All right, and it does show snow in Arkansas and Louisiana. All right, but don't get too excited yet, because that could easily change on the next run. The consistency in the trend has been concerning, though, so I do think something like this, where we get this big storm that rides up the eastern seaboard, is definitely a very good possibility, and even a likelihood at this point for a big snow event, maybe for areas of the northeast back into portions of the Ohio Valley. And another severe weather event would be a problem for areas like Florida and areas like that. So something to keep an eye on there. As we take this beyond this time frame, things become very uncertain with the way storm systems develop. Here you can see there's another one around that time frame. The pattern is definitely supportive of these storm systems. However, the exact placement and impacts and timing are very crucial and very uncertain still at this time. And I wanted to take a quick peek at something before we end this video. The polar vortex. All right, most of you guys know the polar vortex is a very big player in what happens in the winter time. So we have to talk about it here, and it's actually looking pretty pretty interesting as we head, especially in towards the middle part of this month here. Notice the red, all right? This is not at the surface. This is like, I don't know, in the stratosphere. All right, so this is what we call stratospheric warming, all right? You can see that red right there. That is stratospheric warming, or sudden stratospheric warming, if you will. While over here, this is your polar vortex, all right? And it's very cold in and around this, all right? So let's take a look here. With your GFS ensemble model here, you can see as we take this in towards the middle of the month, notice how this SSW really becomes apparent across the portions of western Saskatchewan, back up into portions of the Alaska, or the northern Alaska region, into portions of way northern Canada. There you can see that there. Meanwhile, the polar vortex, you can see, is pretty far east. So, but I do think there's going to be pieces and parts of that being broken off. This is what I said. This is in the stratosphere. This is not anywhere near the surface. So, just take all of this as if you were like 100,000 feet in the atmosphere. All right, so as we take this in towards, though, where that weather pattern change starts to commence, notice the stratospheric warming continuing across portions of southern Canada, as well as all along this boundary around the polar vortex. All right, then watch what this thing does as we head in towards the 23rd, the 24th time frame. It begins to take a little route to the United States. All right, granted, it's not going to fall on the United States, but you can see here that SSW is really getting concerning around this time frame, and it just continues to sit there and strengthen as we head beyond that time frame. So I say by the end of the month, most areas will get pretty cold in this circle region. It is already bitter cold up here, but I mean, down here in the United States, I mean, it's going to get frigid probably anywhere from the Dakotas all the way back into portions of the Southeast, up into the Northeast, back into portions of the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley, with the potential for some dangerously cold wind chills potentially. And for a couple minutes before we end this video, I just wanted to talk about the wind chills. Speaking of the wind chills here, and I fast forwarded all the way through this weekend towards the weekend, all the way to early next week, and you can see here around January 20th, you can see here dangerously cold wind chills for a lot of people across the central, southern, as well as the eastern United States here. Well, not really that far east. You can see here these negatives stop over here, but you get the point. It's going to get dangerously cold for a lot of areas, especially in the northern tier as we head in towards that 20th time frame. And then, as I mentioned, we get that cold air, at least a signal of a cold air intrusion that will really bring down some dangerously cold air. And this is dangerous, guys. All right, do not underestimate this. All right, this has been trending this way for many model runs now, but the timing has been a little bit back and forth, all right? So we do know that there is going to be a big cold blast around this time frame. We just don't know how cold the wind chills are going to get, how far south the wind chills are going to get, at least the negative 30s and 40s, to how cold will it get in areas, all right? And ultimately, will the South experience this big cold blast? That is going to be something in question. All right, so we'll continue to watch for trends as we head later into the model runs here. But you can see here, guys, like this cold air is just going to really unload into the United States as we head in towards the final days as well as week of January. If you guys like this video, make sure you leave a like down below and subscribe if you're not already. And feel free to leave a comment wherever you are. Have a great rest of your day, everybody, and stay safe out there.